what I wanted to share a little bit about tonight is some work that I'm working on personally. This is the book that's coming. I'm birthing a book. I've been doing welcoming and having the audacity to stand up and teach it for about 26 years now. And what I became aware of there are new things I am discovering that I was never aware of, that you probably saw from the get-go, that needed welcoming in me. And I was shocked that the deeper I go, the fresher the experience gets. Wow, look at that. Now, I do a lot of work with forgiveness, the forgiveness practice, which again, Mary Mrozowski actually articulated, the one that is taught in contemplative outreach. But you may know Father William Menninger's book, The Forgiveness Process. And his book was very helpful for me because we have a lot of practices. So tomorrow you're going to learn the welcoming practice. Or I could teach the forgiveness practice. But it's very important to understand that there's a whole process that it falls within. So when Father Menninger articulated, there are 5 stages to the forgiveness process. And the first, you don't have to remember this, but the first is claiming the hurt. The second is guilt. The third is victim. Then there's anger. Then there's moving towards wholeness. And that process, with some big hurts, can take decades. Have you found that? That you may do the best you can do with forgiving or being in that process, but it's more than a single deal or just one prayer practice. It really encompasses sometimes a lifetime's journey of walking through the stages. In God's time, because your task and my task is to take and accept myself exactly where I am and keep surrendering that to God. So as I've been with this welcoming prayer, the stages as I see them right now, and that's why I say it's not done, because who knows what will happen when the words come, is the first stage for me is the funnest and the hardest and the one that is the longest in coming. And that's to see it. There are pieces of myself that I am just beginning to be able to see. They might have been there. As I say, you might know them. They might be ahead of me, that everybody looking at me, because remember, your warehouse is your body. So you see mine better than I see it, right? It's what I give out, but I'm looking at yours. So seeing it, how can I know I need help if I don't even see it? And God so loves us that we're not ready to see things that we're not able to handle yet. So as Thomas teaches, sometimes a good part of the spiritual journey is putting us back together. I don't know about you, but I came to the prayer a mess. Still am, but I'm better. Okay, progress, not perfection. So sometimes the first part of the journey is putting us back together. So you're whole enough to be shattered. Because the surrender and the breakthrough is what it's all about. But it's never out of blame, shame, discouragement, or less than. So most of us come with some baggage that needs to be dealt with before we can be healed enough that we're really ready to do some work. So seeing it has a freshness. Like, wow, I never saw that. Recently, I had the experience that I saw anger I saw. Jealousy and envy was something I never would have related to. I could talk about it as an emotion. I did not see it as part of my personality type. I did not find it on the Enneagram, on Myers-Briggs, on any of the things I like to do to look at, out there, look at that. What does the book say about me? But I was feeling something about a particular situation. And it was intensifying, and I knew I had to do some work. I love the 12 steps, and I believe the 12 steps are the spirituality that goes hand in hand with this. And as a good 12-stepper, I decided to do an inventory on this particular problem. And guess what kept coming up? Jealousy, envy, jealousy, envy, jealousy, envy. And it was shocking, but it was also freeing. It was like, wow, because I started to play it back, and you know what? It's been there a very long time. This latest incident was just the way that I could begin to see it. But when I saw it, which moves me to the second phase, I had to allow it to be there. See, my first reaction to seeing something is to deny it or tell it to go away. If it's not pretty and all shiny and all cleaned up, it's like, nah, I don't really think that. But God's gift to me is that when I'm really supposed to see it, and you might find this in your life, don't you bump into it everywhere you go?
Yep.
You bump into it, you read about it, it's the television show you're watching. It just seems to come in every direction. So eventually, it was allowing it to be there. But those stages are still at arm's length for me. Okay, you might be there, and I might allow you to be in my field of vision. And eventually there comes to a certain level of acceptance. Okay, God, I really, really might have an issue. Not sure. There's no absolutes. But maybe I'm willing to look at it. And then my body leads me right into the welcoming. Now, I've been doing welcoming for years. But before I could see it, in this particular instance, it didn't really relate, if you know what I mean. It wasn't part of Mary. So my script about whatever was happening totally erased that piece. That just was not going to be in the context. It was another story. If we are faithful to this little practice that we did so quietly when we walked into the sanctuary and then into the church, if we're faithful to that little practice which starts so innocuously, wouldn't you like to come to our centering prayer group? We just sit here and we're nice people. If you really take this up, God takes you seriously. And what are we doing in centering prayer? When you ever so gently return to the sacred word, what do we say we're consenting to? God's presence and action. And what's the action? To remove every obstacle that precludes the free flow of grace in us. Change us into his likeness, I heard. But what are those obstacles? They're those parts of our personality that we have totally rejected. or denied, or weren't able to see, or it's all of our stuff. So if we're going to be faithful to the practice, Spirit's going to do what needs to be done in us, which is going to be to start to show us all those little pieces of us that we might not think are so great. The reason it's really important to understand that is usually people come into centering prayer and they say, oh, this is wonderful. I feel so relaxed. This is great. When it's really doing its best work, you often feel like crap. And you're sitting there like, what are you talking about? This is tedious. This is difficult. Everybody's driving me crazy. And that's often when people leave the prayer. You know, like they just quietly go away. Like, well, maybe they're doing something. I don't know. I don't get it. I don't get it at all. Well, you know, it's not peaceful to me. That's when it's working. Truly. And that's where welcoming prayer is at the service of this. Because it's not just during the 20 or 30 minutes in your daily practice. When God really starts to do the work in your life, it's going to happen where? In your life. Who's in your life? People. Your children, your parents, your spouses, your neighbors, your community, our government. You name it, it's all going to start. Because it's the invitation to go deeper and to be freer. Thomas says in the back of Open Mind, Open Heart that the reason centering prayer is not as effective as it could be is that the moment we leave that reservoir of interior silence, which is drained all day, it's constantly drained. The reservoir of silence that's been built up is drained. But if we have another practice to support the purification and transformation in daily life, it's like putting a second engine on our spiritual jet, which gives it the thrust to get off the ground. So you have your anchoring practice of centering prayer twice a day. But what do you do with all this stuff that centering prayer is starting to bring up in your daily life? That's where welcoming is going to be at the service of.